There's only one scenario in which I can see Oregon adding another quarterback in 2025.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. We'll get a look later today at just how different this year's Ohio State game will be from the last time these two teams played, and what Jackson Shelstad and KJ Evans can and need to accomplish in their sophomore seasons for Dana Altman. But we start with the quarterback position, where Oregon is supremely loaded, and there have been discussions over the last week, rumors and reports and whatnot, that they have been on the prowl for Ty Hawkins, who's currently a TCU commit, or, he's looked at SMU as well, a guy whose recruitment is clearly still available, even though he's committed somewhere. And I just don't think that Hawkins is someone Oregon needs to be prioritizing. When you look at where this roster is at, and what the needs are going to be going forward, sure, you can always backfill with the transfer portal in certain spots. I think there are other more pressing recruiting needs, and quarterback just isn't one of them. And the only scenario where Hawkins is someone that they feel like they need to go after is if they don't believe, not in Achilles Smith Jr., but in Luke Moga. If they don't think Moga is capable of developing, and he is certainly a guy that is very raw, he has raw physical traits, but his athleticism is outrageous. From a pure sprinter standpoint, he's probably the fastest quarterback Oregon has had since Marcus Mariota. I don't think I'm off kilter by saying that at all. So when you have that level of speed at the quarterback position, it's unique. Of course, the most important part of the quarterback position is throwing the football. But I feel like Oregon is so set at quarterback for the next couple of years that you've got Dillon Gabriel this year, who I think is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. And next year you're going to have Dante Moore, who, if he's able to reach his potential, could also be the best quarterback in the Big Ten. There will be other guys like Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. If he sticks around there after this season, he's probably going to be the starter as a true freshman. And even if you're highly touted like Dante Moore, that can be a really, really tall order. He looked good in their spring game, but you don't know how he's going to play once teams actually take the field. But this Oregon quarterback room has got Achilles Smith Jr. in it for 2025. So I don't look at the quarterback position and think, with Austin Novosad also in the mix and how good he looked in the spring game back in April, I don't look and say, yeah, no, I think you should get another quarterback for safekeeping. I just think unless you really feel that Moga or Novosad either isn't good enough or is going to transfer out, there's no real reason to. That it doesn't benefit you. I just think the recruiting efforts could be more utilized elsewhere. I think there are spots in which you could better utilize, what time you have, because recruiting is, of course, 24/7, 365, and you have to pick and choose which guys you go after hard and which guys are like, this is more of a soft. And maybe this is more of a soft pursuit. Maybe this is just, maybe if he's interested, he wants to come over. But one thing that, speaking of quarterbacks, I wanted to bring up on today's show is there was a picture of Achilles Smith Jr. with Dillon Gabriel. I don't know if any of you have seen this photograph, but physically, these two guys are not the same. It's kind of wild that they play the same position. If you thought about a photo like that in the context of basketball, you'd say, oh, well, Achilles probably a small forward or a power forward, and Dillon Gabriel's a point guard. But in football, they're playing the same position. And I think they can both. I know that Dillon Gabriel is good. I think Achilles Smith Jr. can be really, really good. And his dad, Achilles Smith, Oregon legend, posted that photo. You'd think that his son is really locked into Oregon, right? So if you're thinking about, my initial take on the show today and thinking, well, maybe Novosad isn't going to stick around, or Moga's not going to stick around, or maybe, I don't think anyone has the thought crossing their mind that Achilles Smith Jr. isn't going to stay committed to Oregon. I have not heard, seen, or read anything to the contrary, and it seems like that guy is dead set on being a Duck, which I think is great because he's a really talented guy. if you go into next season and your quarterback room is Dante Moore, you know he's not going anywhere. Austin Novosad, if they battle it out for the starting job, and then in 2026, if Dante Moore has a great year, he might go to the NFL. If he has just an okay year, feels like he can improve his draft stock, then maybe Dante Moore's your starter in 2026. By that point, certainly I'd think Austin Novosad, who's a talented guy, will have transferred out by that time as well. And then you have Achilles Smith and Luke Moga fighting to be the backup and looking to start the next season. Like the plan is just so set. And they have done an exceptional job of bringing in a couple of high-level veteran transfer quarterbacks, but also setting themselves up for the possibility that maybe there isn't a transfer quarterback that we like going forward. And we actually do want to go with a young guy who's had a couple of years to sit. And I think that that's a good plan. I think that that's a good plan. And I know there are those fans out there that are nostalgic and want the more old school of, recruit a quarterback, have him sit for a year or two, and then have him be the starter and, try to win the job in spring camp and whatnot. And I don't think that that's a model that is just completely phased out of college football. We haven't seen Dan Lanning do it yet because it's been Bo Nix, and year 3 is going to be Dillon Gabriel. But I think Will Stein's a pretty sharp dude and a good quarterbacks coach and a great offensive coordinator. So I look at where this quarterback room is at and say, look, if Hawkins commits to Oregon, okay. It just means the staff knows something that we don't. And of course, the staff knows a lot of things that we do not know. But that would mean one of Novosad or Moga either doesn't have the faith in the coaching staff or doesn't have the faith of the coaching staff, I think is the proper way to phrase that, or one of them is planning to transfer out. Or maybe, here's the thing about this. This is maybe a possibility. What if Luke Moga ends up playing a different position? It's happened before. Sam Jackson IV committed to TCU out of high school. Didn't play there. Went to go compete for the starting job at Cal last year. Played, didn't impress, turned it over too much. They went with Fernando Mendoza, their third stringer eventually, and he was better than both the guys that were ahead of him on the depth chart, which is kind of wild. Like after you saw him play, anyway, coaching and quarterback development is very, very hard. Sam Jackson transferred to Auburn, and he's now a wide receiver. Moga is that caliber of athlete, and maybe that's what they see him as. I don't think so, because there have been no indications as such, and he's, going into his true freshman season. Like, he hasn't even given the quarterback thing the old college try, but maybe in a year or two in their back pocket, they go to him at some point and say, hey, we feel like you should either transfer out if you want to play quarterback, or we think we have a place for you here at receiver. But Oregon's receiving pursuits on the recruiting trail aren't exactly slouching. They're incredibly good. This year, next year, the receiving rooms are as stacked as we've ever seen them, including this past season. So I think the quarterback situation is really, really strong for Oregon. If they add Hawkins to the mix, okay, but then you'd really have quite the lineup of quarterback battles, not just in 2025, but in 2026 as well. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. We're going to talk Ohio State coming up next, because the last time these two teams played, it went a certain way, a great way for Oregon. That was a fantastic day. This game, though, is going to be tougher on both sides to win. I'll tell you what I mean coming up next. First, let's talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Call it the Dan Lanning of car part buying services. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. However, second segment sips available to me, because I'm the host of the show. Mailbag time, YouTube comments, or X, formerly known as Twitter. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. That link is in the description below wherever you listen to or watch the show. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. Not a requirement though, but I do my very best to make it worth your while. This one came in via the Twitter direct mentions from Blazer Duck, longtime question asker on the show. Spencer, any true Oregon fan knows that Ohio State is the toughest game on the schedule. Well, funny you should mention that. We were talking about that yesterday. And I only half answer the question. I agree that Ohio State at home is tougher than Michigan on the road. I just think it's a lot closer than people might look at on paper and say because of everything Michigan lost. You got to go to Michigan. It's a tough game. Would you please do a comparison/breakdown of each position on offense and defense between the 2021 Ducks team and the 2024 Ducks team and let us know who has the advantage? Could you do the same with Ohio State and who has the advantage? You could do the same for the head coaches. Does this help to instill more confidence or nervousness? Remember, Thibodeau and Justin Flo didn't play in that game, and it was at Ohio State. Thanks, Spencer. Yeah, I could never forget anything. The line was 14.5. I thought Oregon was going to lose. Game day picked them to lose, and they won the game 35-28. And CJ Stroud went for 484 yards and 3 touchdowns. So we'll start with the head coaches. Oregon has upgraded at head coach. Ohio State is the same at head coach. They were already at a very high level. Ryan Day is very good. I think the slander or knocks against him are number one, overblown, and number two, wherever they do exist, ridiculous. I think Ryan Day is really good. He is really, really good. I take Dan Lanning over Mario Cristobal. And Cristobal, by any objective metric, was a good coach. Lanning is better. And I think Oregon is upgraded there. So, position group by position group. Why don't we start with Oregon here? So, quarterback position. Anthony Brown, Dillon Gabriel. I'll take Dillon Gabriel. Every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Running backs. I like C.J. Verdell and Travis Dye. Give me Jordan James and Noah Whittington. I think Jordan James is a better version of C.J. Verdell, and Whittington's got more physical traits than Dye did, though he was a very effective back. Wide receivers. Mentioned this with Eric yesterday on the pod. This isn't close. Oregon is so much better at wide receiver. That might be the single greatest gap in position group from that Oregon team to this Oregon team. I mean, by a landslide, these receivers are better. Tight end, Oregon's a little better now. This one isn't quite as big of a gap. T. Ferg was actually a true freshman with Maliki Mataval. Like, that tight end room was pretty darn good. I just think this one with Kenyon Sadiq in year 2, Herbert is a solid backup, and T. Ferg in year 4. Obviously, he's a better player now than he was as a true freshman, so tight end slightly better. Offensive line, this one gives me a little bit of pause. Looking back to the last time these teams played, I think there's an unknown quality here. You have a new starting center in Poncho and a new right guard coming over from Indiana and Matthew Bedford, who, is an experienced guy, is also playing his 6th year of college football because the NFL probably hasn't given him a super high draft grade yet. Right now, though I love Oregon's offensive line, I might put it a touch below that 2021 unit just because there was more veteran leadership and continuity. Continuity is really the big thing. You got Marcus Harper and, Connerly's going into his 2nd year starting, but true freshman center, Alex Forsyth was at center in 2021. This offensive line, probably just a touch below that one. Still, PFF recently had Oregon's offensive lines, I think one of the 5 or 10 best in all of college football. And I think that's very fair. Defensive line, especially without Thibodeau in that game, yeah, Oregon is much better. That's also not even close. They got no pressure on CJ Stroud in that game. I'd be shocked if that's the case here against Ohio State, even though the Buckeyes' offensive line is good. Oregon's linebackers, Noah Sewell was a beast. I'll take Justin Jacobs and Jeff Bossa over the combo they had. Again, that one is closer than it might seem on paper, but I think the linebackers are better. The corners, definitely better. Definitely better. Safety's more of an unknown. I mean, you got Jabbar Muhammad. There was no corner on the field in 2021 for Oregon as singularly talented as Jabbar Muhammad is. So, yeah, corners are better. Safety's unknown because that safety room had Verone McKinley, and that's the last true ball hawk I feel like Oregon has had on the back end of their defense, and it's something that I think is the biggest relative weakness. Not to say they don't have good players back there. Compared to the rest of the defense, safety is the room that I feel the least confident about. Eric Skopel shared those sentiments on yesterday's show. That was a great conversation overall. If you didn't check it out, you should, wherever you're listening to or watching the show right now. I'll go unknown on the safeties just because of the Verone McKinley factor. McKinley made some big plays in that game. He had the game-sealing interception. He had a couple other huge pass breakups that kept points off the board, and we'll see if Kobe Savage is able to be that sort of guy. Kansas State transfer, was all Big 12 second team a year ago. We'll see how well he's able to play as a rangy guy on the back end. Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus has said in the past that he does a lot of his best work kind of down around the line of scrimmage in the box, and Oregon's got a lot of those guys. But do they have a guy that can be a ball hawk? Do they have a Brady Breeze, a Verone McKinley, Javon Holland, John Boyette, somebody like that on the back end? Kind of an unknown. But across the board, up and down, from head coach to every position, Oregon is much better. Oregon is much better. Ohio State, they are worse at quarterback. That is, they do not have someone who's going to go for 484 yards. I don't think they have someone that could go for 400 yards. I don't know if they have someone that could go for over 300 yards, quite frankly. Like, Will Howard is capable. He is solid. But you not only have, now the running backs are better for Ohio State than they were in 2021, but the wide receivers are a step down. Jeremiah Smith, true freshman, that guy could be really good. Emeka Egbuka, good wideout. That receiving core in 21 had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba on it. I mean, I'm a Seahawks fan. I'm watching Jackson Smith. That dude's good. And I watched him a lot in college. He was really good. He's a real deal. Real deal wide receiver. So I think their wide receivers have taken a step down. I think their tight ends are about the same. And this is my, from afar perception of how the Ohio State team is, and in my conversations with Jay Stevens, our Locked On Ohio State host. But, their tight ends, I think, are pretty good. Their offensive line is going to be a strength for them. Jay has said many times, I believe, that he feels really good about Ohio State's offensive line, and they should be, about as good as they were then. They were very good that day. I mean, C.J. Stroud was sacked one time, or he was sacked twice the whole game, and it was at the end when Oregon had, essentially put it away. So I think their offensive line is the same or better, and that's playing at a very high level. I think this defensive line for Ohio State is better. Linebackers, I'm not really sure. It's probably a wash. They're gonna have blue chip guys that are playing there on both teams. Their corners, they are probably around the same. They had some good corners on that team, but they've kind of moved away from being DBU over the last few years. They had a lot of guys really highly drafted, but they haven't as much lately. They've been more offensively oriented with Ryan Day, and their safeties are going to be better because they've got Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs is probably the best overall safety in college football. He's just ridiculously good. So I like that question from Blazer Duck, by the way, because it illustrates that the team that wins that game on October 12th, you're going to get all the benefits in the rankings. You're going to have confidence. You're going to have fans feeling good as you should. And both teams, their seasons won't be defined in that one game. But you'll get a pretty good understanding that whoever comes out a winner on October 12th at Autzen Stadium, you're going to look at differently because both of these teams have recruited and developed and have good coaches and great systems that they're operating at a high level. Oregon is operating at a high level. Ohio State's been operating at a high level. These are not just big brands. Like Ohio State, Michigan next year is a game between two teams with humongous brands, but are they the same caliber teams they have been every year in the past? Probably not, because Michigan's going to be a step down from what they were the last 3 years under Jim Harbaugh when they went to the playoff went to the playoff all three times. Michigan's probably not a playoff team. They're probably a good team, but not a playoff team this year. So I think that game's going to be absolutely awesome, and it's going to be harder for whoever's going to win it. It's going to be harder than it was in 2021 because I think both teams have improved. Great question. Love the way that was laid out there. There's another question, and it's about Oregon men's basketball, and it's about what sort of sophomore leap can those two 5-star studs make? That's coming up next. So Jackson Shelstad and KJ Evans were integral parts of Oregon's round of 32 team a season ago, Pac-12 tournament champs, of course, and I think they go into the Big Ten as one of the 3 or 4 favorites in the league. Certainly, having Supreme Cook instead of N'Faly Dante is a step down, but I like the Supreme Cook edition. Veteran guy, productive, capable, reliable. You know what you're going to get from him in more than one sense. But what Oregon accomplishes this season may very well come down to how their two young 5-star sophomores make the leap from year 1 to year 2. And Mookie Cook wasn't in this particular question that came in from Lucas, who asked, how big of a jump do you think Jackson and KJ will make? Do you think either could break out and make up for some of the scoring we lost? I'll get to that in a sec. We don't know what Mookie Cook is. They all three came in together in the class of 2023 as 5 stars. Shelstad and Evans were starters basically the whole year. Evans, I think, started more games because there was a stretch where he was, having to essentially play the 5 when they would take Mo Diawara out, and Shelstad was kind of working his way into being the starting point guard, but he was by the end of the year. And I mean, Shelstad is so good. That guy is ridiculously good. And it's crazy to say because Peyton Pritchard just won an NBA championship with the Celtics. He's the backup point guard, but he's really good. And he was incredible at Oregon by the end. Shelstad, as a freshman, is further along than Peyton Pritchard was. We'll see how Shelstad's game evolves. I think there is an absolute possibility that he puts up numbers that either rival or surpass Peyton Pritchard's one day, depending on the team around him. Pritchard put up crazy numbers in part because he had to. He had Chris Duarte and Anthony Mathis and not too many other scorers all the time. I think he might have been on a team with Eugenio Marui, who was good, but that's all blending together in my head, and I'm getting sidetracked here. So Shelstad and Evans are two guys that are absolutely capable of making big leaps for different reasons, and one that is the same. The reason that's the same is I think their field goal attempts are going to go up. We'll see if they maintain their efficiency, but Shelstad for a point guard, especially a true freshman, was crazy efficient last year. He averaged just under 13 points a game. He shot at 35% from beyond the arc, which is a good clip. He was 45% from the floor. When you look at guards across the country, basketball is a tall man's game. Guards typically are in the low 40s, sometimes even the high 30s, and they're not the most efficient scorers, but they can be volume scorers because they got a lot of shots up. If Shelstad's field goal attempts per game, and he attempted the second most field goals on Oregon's team last year, second only to Kuznard, if he is the leader in shot attempts and maintains that efficiency, 20-point-a-game score. Not kidding. He can score at 3 levels. He can score with 2 hands. He's a tough shot maker. He reads the defense as well. He's a good passer. I mean, he is so worth the hype. He is absolutely awesome. But I don't think it's crazy for Shelstad to lead the team in scoring and or field goal attempts this year. Now, Evans is the one that could make a bigger leap by percentage. So Shelstad was 13 points a game last year. With all the guys they brought in, he'll probably be closer to 16, 17 points per game. And Kuznard last year was 16.5 points per game, and Dante was 17 points per game. So on average, Oregon needs to find about 34 points per. That's a pretty hefty amount to make up. Now, Nate Biddle, if he's healthy, that could be a 12 to 13 point a game score, maybe even more than that. And Brandon Angel, yeah, he can score as well. And TJ Bamba, he can score too. I think Evans is going to be a big part of this offense. His talent is immense, and I think they convinced him to come back because they know that he's so talented. That's why they recruited him, of course, and that he's going to have a larger role in the offense because he was 5th in field goal attempts last year on a team that really had 3 scorers who I'd say were definitely more capable than him for his true freshman season. And that was Kuznard, Dante, and Shelstad. And in one-on-one situations, frankly, he and Dante were probably pretty close. I mean, he's got a jump shot, and Folly Dante does not, but Dante, made a lot of his own shots. So I think that, and what I mean by that is, getting offensive rebounds or just dominating with position, whereas Evans was more of a complementary piece. KJ Evans last year averaged 7 points a game. He shot at 45% from the field, which is a number I also think can go up in large part if he increases his 3-point percentage. He was just under 27% from deep last season. I fully expect that number to go up. He does not have a glitchy or kind of shot or a hitch in his shot. I don't know why I said glitch. Hitch is obviously the right word. He doesn't have a funky shot. He's comfortable out there. He can catch and shoot, knock down a 3. if he raises that percentage to just even the low 30s, but gosh almighty, if he really works on it, if the coaching staff gets with him like they did with Kuznard, who wasn't a great three-point shooter at South Carolina, but was around like 34, 35% this past year, if Evans makes that sort of leap, that dude is also a dynamic three-level scorer. He can put it on the floor. He can hit the mid-range. He can post up. I think his post-up game can use a little bit of work, but he's got a fadeaway aspect that is filthy good. I look at him, I see a lot of Chris Bosh, not just because he's lefty, but stylistically, I see Chris Bosh. And a guy like that can really easily, because of his versatility, be a 15-point-a-game scorer. But if you're trying to find, 34 points per game that you're trying to make up, if you put Shelstad up to, let's say, 17 a game, okay, there's 4. Now you need to make up 30 more. I think Evans can be at least a 12-point-a-game scorer. Now you're missing 25. TJ Bamba is probably in the 10 to 12 range. Nate Biddle, also probably in the 10 to 12 range. I think they're capable of more, but there are just so many mouths to feed on this offense. I think the ball's going to get spread around a lot. And then Brandon Angel and guys like Raheem Moss off the bench will chip in points. You'll have Keyshawn Bartholomew there. I'm not worried about what this team, and Supreme Cook, 10-point-a-game scorer last year, not a slouch offensively. I think his offensive role probably goes down with the role he's going to play on this team. But for Evans and Shelstad, yeah, I think that they are capable of making a year 2 leap, and I think Oregon needs them to make that sort of year 2 leap and to be the foundational pieces, maybe even of the team the following year as well. It's really hard to predict what is going to happen with all these guys, and will they stick around and everything like that, or will they go to the NBA? Because Evans especially has got NBA draft potential. Shelstad is smaller. I could see Shelstad being at least a 3-year guy with the Ducks. Maybe not 4, because if he fully develops, then yeah, if Pritchard has a role in the NBA, Shelstad could too. They're both small, but Shelstad's actually quicker and a better athlete, and I think has got a better mid-range game at this point in his career. Pritchard was a little, I think, kind of craftier because he had to be, because he's not quite as explosive athletically. But I think I am as high as you can possibly be on both of these guys. And don't sleep. Shelstad needs to improve his on-ball defense, but he got a lot of steals and he gets out in transition. Like, he's just so explosive and quick. Evans' defensive capability is already at such a high level. Like, he is an all-conference caliber guy if his offense rounds into form. If he starts hitting threes, let's say he shoots 33% from beyond the arc next year, I think he'll be close to 15 points a game. He'll absolutely be starting for Oregon. He'll still be in the 6-7 rebound department. I think he'll average a block per, and don't be surprised if he's like a first or second team All Big Ten selection. First team, there are a lot of players in the league, and that's a tough list to crack, but I won't be surprised if he gets there next year or if he stays for another season the following year, because the defensive capabilities he showcased as a true freshman were remarkably good. When Dante went down and Evans would start at the 4, they'd put Mo DOR out there to be a big body, but then in end-of-game situations, and for a majority of the game, KJ Evans was the 5. He was playing as a smaller 5, and he was a great rim protector. I was thoroughly impressed. And he can defend multiple positions too. I think these guys are every bit as talented as we thought they were when they committed as 5 stars in the class of 2023. And I think going into this year, I'd be shocked if KJ Evans is under 10 points per game. And I'd be shocked if Shelstad is under 15 a game. Even with all the guys they've brought in who are going to help Oregon score this year, I think their talent is just, they're going to be the focal point of what Oregon does this season, and I think they absolutely should be. Great question. Keep them coming in. YouTube comments, Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, whatever you'd like to call it. Or if you want priority access, you can join Subtext as well. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.